Hello, my name is Paul Swan and I'm a mathematics educator. What I'd like to do today is just share a few ideas of how you can get the most from your Turn and Learn board. Before we start some of the activities on the board, it's worth us just having a quick look at the configuration of the board. You notice that it's currently set to start at 0 and to finish at 119. Some teachers prefer to begin their activities with 0. Other teachers, however, like a different approach, so they often like to start with 1. So you just simply roll these across and then we lift these up, and you'll notice that we've changed the configuration now to go from 1 to 120. You notice that we have this spare column that's just sitting there, so we either have one spare at this end or one at that end. You also notice what's very good is that the board goes beyond 100, and that's extremely important. Another nice feature is that when you turn one of the numbers, it turns from white to yellow, and that way it's able to highlight patterns. Notice, for example, here the pattern of the 9 times table becomes quite clear. If you were to turn it again, you'll notice that you get a blank. We can use the blank in different activities that we'll look at just to highlight some other features of the board. Sometimes when you're working with the younger children, you might only want to work with the numbers, say, from 1 to 50. In that case, you just simply blank out all the rows beneath that and you can just concentrate on those numbers. When using the board, it's a good idea to use the correct mathematical language. So, for example, from 50 to 59, we would refer to that as a row, and from 5 to 115 would be a column. Where the two intersect here at 55, that would be the cell. You'll notice that the standard grid tends to start with 0 or 1 in the top left-hand corner and will finish with 119 or 120 in the bottom corner. However, you can turn this board around just by releasing the lever on this side here and turning it around. Once the board's been released and turned around, you'll notice now that 0 is down this bottom corner, and so we're starting from the bottom and working our way up. It's a good idea when you start any activities to try and get children familiar with the way that the grid's laid out. For example, if you look here, if I turn over the number 25, the number 35, 10 more, is directly below, whereas the number 15, 10 less, is directly above. Likewise, the number 24 is 1 before, the number 26, 1 afterwards. You could also see, for example, the number 35, the number 44, 9 away from it, is in that spot there, and the number 46 is 11 away from it. So you need to have a look and play with some ideas, like looking at what happens when I add 10 onto 2. I might go 12, and then 22, and then 32, and 42, so the kids get used to both the columns and the row structure of the board. One of my favourite activities using the board is to play the game Who Am I? And that involves hunting down a particular number based on a series of clues. So, for example, the first clue might be that I'm a number that's greater than 20 and less than 80. You'll notice that what we've been able to do is take out all the numbers that didn't match that first clue, and you'll even notice that the number 20 has been turned over, and that's because the clue said there was greater than 20, so it doesn't include 20, and that becomes nice and clear for the children. Let's look at the next clue. I am a multiple of 3. You'll notice now that we're left with far few numbers with that clue of being a multiple of 3. The next clue would be I'm also a multiple of 2. The last clue was that I was also a multiple of 2, so we can see that's knocked out a lot more numbers. Now the next clue is that I'm also a multiple of 9. You'll notice that the last clue, that it was a multiple of 9, has left us only with 3 numbers, the 36, the 54 and the 72. Now you could use any of a number of different clues to narrow it down to just one number. For example, you might say that there's a 5 in the tens place of my number, so in this case that would make it 54. A slightly more difficult clue would be that I'm a square number, so that would leave us with just 36. You can see how this activity could easily be adapted to a variety of different clues and different starting numbers, and even better still, how the children themselves could write a series of clues, then test it by sitting as a small group in front of the board and turning the numbers as they go. The board's ideal for developing a whole pile of counting patterns and turning it over as you count, For example, you could count in 2s, you could count in 4s, 5s. Let's just have a look at what happens when you count in 4s. So you turn over 4, 8, 12, 16, 20. So we can count along at the same time as we turn over the numbers and look at the patterns. You can vary your counting activities just by making one slight change to the board. Notice this time we've blanked some numbers out, and you could have the board with the numbers blanked out, and kids could work out what pattern it is. In this case, you'll notice that the missing number is 4, and then we've got 8, and then we've got 12, and 16, and 20, so they could work out that we're counting by 4s or looking at the multiples of 4. The board shouldn't just be restricted to junior primary areas. It can be used to set up a number of investigations for older children. For example, take a look at how we've configured the board here, and you'll notice that we've turned over 9 numbers from 14, 15, 16, 24, 25, 26, 34, 35, 36. So you might set the challenge to work out the total or the sum of all the numbers in that 3x3 box, and then see if the children can find a quicker or simpler way to do it. After performing a variety of investigations using 3x3 boxes on the board, the children might come to the conclusion that if you multiply the middle number by 9, that is the total of the 9 numbers that are in the box. So in this case, 9 25s would give us the total of the 9 numbers shown in that 3x3 box. Another investigation you might like to try with some children is to consider that 3x3 box in this particular case. This time look at the relationship between the numbers that are in opposite corners. So to make that a little bit easier, we'll just blank out some of the numbers and just leave the 4 left. You'll notice 14 and 36 is 50, 16 and 34 is 50. I wonder whether that will happen for other 3x3 boxes or 4x4 boxes or 5x5 boxes. You might also notice that in this case it's double the centre number. Is that the same for all other boxes? The board's an ideal way of showing a variety of patterns. We're just going to look at a few now, but the first one we'll show you is the 9 times table pattern. You'll notice that there are 2 quite distinct patterns in the multiples of 9. For example, the number 9 starts at the top right hand corner, and then we get a diagonal pattern down the board, but also there's a pattern between the digits. So 1 and 8 make 9, 2 and 7 makes 9, 3 and 6 makes 9, 4 and 5 makes 9. So if it's a multiple of 9, the digits will always add up to 9. That allows us to look at things like the divisibility rules. So we know if a number is divisible by 9 if its digits add up to 9. So you could ask the children, give them a 2 or 3 digit number and ask them whether it's divisible by 9 without leaving a remainder. I hope you've found these few ideas worthwhile and interesting. I'm sure as you play with the board a little bit more with yourself, with the children, you'll find many more ideas. If you're looking for even further ideas, try looking at the book Turn and Learn, Exploring the Possibilities, and thank you very much for listening.